In 1867, an amateur fossil hunter named J. Terrell was walking along the cliffs near Lake Erie in Ohio when he found something strange embedded in the rock, a piece of bone, thick, dense, plate-like, much larger than anything he expected to find. He had no idea what animal it came from, neither did anyone else, for a while. What scientists eventually pieced together was one of the most formidable predators that has ever existed on this planet. An animal that lived 370 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, long before anything we would recognize as modern. 6 to 10 meters long, armored, with a bite that biomechanical studies put in the same range as a Tyrannosaurus rex. Its name is Dunkleosteus, and this is its story. Dunkleosteus was not a shark, and it was not a dinosaur. It belonged to a group called the placoderms, an entirely extinct class of armored fish that dominated the seas for over 70 million years during the Devonian period. The Devonian ran from about 415 million years ago to 359 million years ago. Scientists sometimes call it the Age of Fishes, and that label fits. The seas of that time were full of diverse, often strange-looking fish, and placoderms were among the most successful of them. Placoderms were among the earliest jawed vertebrates on Earth. Their defining feature was heavy bony armor covering the head and upper chest, not scales, but actual interlocking bony plates forming a rigid shield. They came in many shapes and sizes, from small bottom dwellers to large predators. Dunkleosteus was at the extreme end of that range. Dunkleosteus is technically a genus, not a single species. Researchers have identified at least 10 species within it. But when people say Dunkleosteus, they almost always mean the biggest one, Dunkleosteus terrelli. That is the species named after J. Terrell, the man who found the first bones, and David Dunkel, the paleontologist who formally studied them. Fossils of Dunkleosteus have been found across multiple continents: North America, Europe, North Africa, parts of Asia. That distribution tells us it was widespread, ranging across the connected shallow seas of the Late Devonian world. It was not a local animal confined to one region. It was a genuinely global top predator. Dunkleosteus terrelli lived during the Late Devonian, approximately 382 to 358 million years ago, a span of roughly 24 million years as an apex predator. To put that time span in perspective, our own genus, Homo, has existed for about 3 million years. Dunkleosteus was at the top of the food chain for 8 times longer than that. Here's one of the more frustrating things about Dunkleosteus from a scientific standpoint. We only have clear fossil evidence of the front part of the animal, the armored head and chest. The rear half of the body was made of cartilage, like modern sharks, and cartilage almost never fossilizes, so our picture of the complete animal involves some educated reconstruction. What we do have, though, is a very detailed record of the front end, and that is also the most interesting part. Size estimates for Dunkleosteus terrelli range from around 6 meters on the conservative side to roughly 10 meters at the upper end. Most researchers land somewhere around 6 to 8 meters as a reasonable working estimate. For comparison, a large great white shark is typically 4 to 5 meters. So we are talking about something bigger and considerably heavier. Weight estimates for larger individuals reach over 4 metric tons. The front of the animal was covered in thick interlocking bony plates, the armor that defines placoderms. This was not thin protective scaling, it was dense structural bone, several centimeters thick in places, forming a rigid helmet and breastplate arrangement over the head and upper body. Now, the critical detail is how the head armor connected to the body armor. There was a joint between them, a specific articulation point, and that joint allowed the entire skull to tilt upward when the animal opened its mouth. Not just the lower jaw dropping down, but the whole head lifting at the same time. This is called cranial kinesis, and in Dunkleosteus it was taken to an extreme. Biomechanical studies have shown that this mechanism allowed Dunkleosteus to open its mouth extremely quickly, in a fraction of a second. The speed of the opening may have created a partial vacuum, drawing prey toward the mouth before the jaws even closed. Rather than teeth, Dunkleosteus had sharp, bony plates fused directly to its jawbones, 2 pairs of blade-like structures, 1 pair on the upper jaw, 1 on the lower. As the jaws closed, these blades sheared against each other like scissors, and because they rubbed against each other constantly, they self-sharpened. The cutting edges stayed razor-sharp throughout the animal's life, without any need for replacement. The bite force generated by this system was enormous. Research using biomechanical modeling estimates the force at the jaw tip at over 4,000 newtons, with higher forces at the rear cutting blades. For context, a saltwater crocodile, one of the strongest biters alive today, produces around 16,000 newtons. The jaw mechanics were driven by what researchers describe as a 4-bar linkage system, 4 rotational joints in the skull working together to generate and transmit force. It made Dunkleosteus capable of eating animals with heavy bone or shell armor that most other predators of the time simply could not handle. Given the jaw we just described, the diet of Dunkleosteus was fairly predictable, essentially anything it could catch. Other placoderms, early sharks, large invertebrates like ammonites, its bite could penetrate bone and shell, so armor on prey animals offered little protection. We have some direct fossil evidence of its feeding behavior. At sites in Ohio, researchers have found what appear to be regurgitated pellets near Dunkleosteus fossils, compressed masses of crushed bone, similar to the pellets that owls produce today. The animal apparently ate prey whole or in large pieces, digested the soft parts, and then regurgitated the compacted skeletal remains. Some of those bone fragments in the pellets belong to other large placoderms. Some evidence points toward Dunkleosteus preying on others of its own species. Cannibalism is not unusual among large predatory fish. It happens in several living species, and for an animal this size, anything in the water was a potential food source. In terms of hunting style, there has been debate about whether Dunkleosteus was a fast, active pursuer or more of a slow ambush predator. The armored head was heavy, which would have affected maneuverability. The current thinking is probably somewhere in between, not a fast open water chaser, but not purely passive either. At its size, it likely did not need to chase anything very far. It was the largest predator in its environment. As juveniles, Dunkleosteus individuals were much smaller and probably ate smaller prey, fish, and invertebrates. Jaw proportions in adult specimens suggest a shift toward larger prey as the animal grew, with the elongated lower jaw being a specific adaptation for handling big, tough food items. The world Dunkleosteus inhabited was rich with life. The Late Devonian seas had coral reefs, ammonites, early sharks, diverse invertebrates. On the nearby land, the first forests were spreading, tree ferns and early woody plants covering the continents for the first time. It was a productive, complex world. And at the top of the marine part of that world sat Dunkleosteus, essentially unchallenged. Now we come to how it ended, and the extinction of Dunkleosteus is not a simple story. The Late Devonian mass extinction was not a single event. It was a series of environmental crises stacked across several million years, with two main pulses. The first is called the Kellwasser event, which occurred around 372 million years ago. It devastated coral reef ecosystems and wiped out a large number of marine species. Placoderms were severely affected, but they survived. Dunkleosteus made it through. The second pulse is called the Hangenberg event, and it occurred right at the boundary between the Devonian and Carboniferous periods, approximately 359 million years ago. This one finished everything. The Hangenberg event caused extinction of all placoderms and an estimated 70 to 80% of all marine species on Earth. Geologists have identified a distinct sediment layer found all over the world, from Germany to Morocco to Ohio to China, called the Hangenberg Black Shale. It is a dark, organic-rich rock that formed in water almost completely devoid of oxygen. Its presence on multiple continents tells us this was a global event, not a regional one. The primary driver scientists point to is ocean anoxia, widespread oxygen loss in the oceans. When large areas of the ocean lose their oxygen, most animal life cannot survive there. The evidence in the rock record shows this happened rapidly and on a massive scale. The chain of events that caused it is still being worked out, but the leading explanation goes roughly like this. The Late Devonian saw the rapid spread of the first large forests on land. Those forests pulled significant amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. As CO2 declined, global temperatures dropped. Cooler temperatures affected ocean circulation. Normally, cold surface water sinks and carries dissolved oxygen down to the deep ocean. That is a key part of how ocean chemistry stays balanced. As circulation patterns changed, that process broke down in certain areas. Large parts of the seafloor, and eventually even shallow coastal waters, became anoxic. The new forests also changed what washed into the sea from rivers, more nutrients, more organic material, leading to algal blooms. When those blooms died and decomposed, they consumed more oxygen. The problem compounded itself, and recent research has added another layer. Studies published in the last several years have found elevated mercury concentrations in Hangenberg black shale deposits from multiple locations around the world. High mercury in ancient sediments is generally interpreted as a signal of large-scale volcanic activity because major eruptions release significant quantities of mercury into the atmosphere. So the picture is not a single clean cause. It is a convergence: forest-driven cooling, disrupted ocean circulation, oxygen depletion, possible volcanic emissions, and reef collapse, all of it within a geologically brief window of less than 100,000 years. The result was the extinction of between 70 and 80% of all marine species. Every single placoderm, the entire class, without exception, was gone by the end of it. Why placoderms specifically, when sharks and early bony fish survived? A few factors probably contributed. Large body size is a disadvantage in a collapsing ecosystem. Bigger animals need more food, and when prey populations crash, the large predators feel it first. The heavy bone armor was also metabolically expensive to produce. In conditions of food scarcity, lighter, more efficient animals had an edge. Whatever the precise combination of factors, Dunkleosteus and every other placoderm did not make it through. 359 million years ago, the entire lineage ended. The extinction cleared enormous ecological space. In the Carboniferous period that followed, sharks diversified rapidly. The early Carboniferous is sometimes called a golden age for sharks because of how many new species appeared to fill the roles left empty by placoderms. Bony fish also diversified extensively. Over the following tens of millions of years, bony fish gradually filled the niches placoderms had occupied for so long. And some of those early bony fish lineages eventually gave rise to the first four-limbed land vertebrates, and from there to amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So in a fairly direct sense, the animals that survived the Hangenberg event are the ancestors of every land vertebrate alive today, including us. The extinction that killed Dunkleosteus was also part of the chain of events that led to the world as it currently exists. Dunkleosteus itself left an important legacy. It was one of the first true apex predators vertebrates ever produced, proof of concept for the ecological role that would later be filled by giant sharks, marine reptiles, and eventually toothed whales. It pioneered a body plan and a set of ecological strategies that later groups refined and continued. Research on Dunkleosteus is also still active. Studies published as recently as 2025 have revised our understanding of its jaw musculature and feeding mechanics. The fossil record keeps yielding new information, and our picture of the animal continues to be refined. That is the full story of Dunkleosteus, from the first fossils found on the Lake Erie cliffs to the global catastrophe that ended its lineage 359 million years ago. It is a genuinely interesting animal, and I think it deserves more attention than it usually gets. If you found this useful, a like helps the channel, and subscribing means you will see the next one when it comes out. See you in the next one, and until then, stay curious.